Ever since the Congress Party's manifesto for the 2024 election was released on April 5th, one word has dominated the media and political narrative: redistribution. There is this whole narrative that has been spread which says the Congress manifesto promises to snatch gold and other wealth from people and redistribute it. Of course, that is a lie, and there's not a single line like that in the 48 pages of the manifesto that says it. Nevertheless, the topic of redistribution has become a debate. And it is actually maybe a good thing that we are debating inequality and redistribution in India. Yes, inequality between the rich and the poor has widened a lot in the last 15 years or so. Not only in India, but across the world. And we should not politicize this serious issue by arguing silly about under whose government did inequality increase and all of that. This is a very serious issue. But to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, India can make the poor richer without making the rich poorer. That is, make the poor rich, not the rich poor. Let me explain. To reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, it is important to ensure that the poor gain from economic growth more than the rich. If you think that the overall economy cannot grow fast, then the only way to reduce the gap is to take from the rich and give to the poor, right? This is what the developed countries like America and Europe are facing. Their economic growth is not as high for the rich to continue to keep their share and the poor to gain more. So they adopt an approach of what is called zero sum to solve the inequality problem in their countries, which is to tax the wealthy people and redistribute it to the poor. So developed countries have taxes such as wealth tax, estate tax, inheritance tax, etc. But India is a developing nation. We can grow the economy fast. The overall economy can grow large enough for the rich to keep their share and the poor to gain more. Thus, India does not have to adopt a zero-sum method. Most important for India is to reduce economic disparity is to have fast economic growth. And economic growth needs investment. So if India adopts tax the rich measures such as wealth tax or inheritance tax, then investment will get impacted and growth will get impacted. You may say that the rich business people in India acquire their wealth by gaming the system through unfair means of cronyism with political nexus. It may be true, but the solution for that is to fix the crony system, not put a revenge tax on their wealth in the disguise of inequality. This will scare away even the honest business people from investing. Inheritance tax may sound even more morally correct. You may say that it is unfair that a child born into a rich family is wealthy from day one, while a child born into a poor family is not. So an inheritance tax must be levied to remove this unfairness. This may be ethically justified. But remember, our objective here is to close the gap between the rich and the poor, not solve an ethical problem. Wealth tax or inheritance tax in India will never generate enough money to make a significant impact on reducing the rich-poor gap. But it can have a significant negative impact on investment and economic growth, which is far more important to reduce inequality. India's inequality is because economic growth today does not translate into jobs, incomes and prosperity for the majority of people. It only leads to gains for the few rich business owners and investors. Economic growth is lopsided. This is because of what is called in economics as the capital-labor imbalance. Economic development today is skewed heavily towards capital because it is more efficient. But this increases the rich-poor gap. So to solve economic inequality, India must rebalance the capital-labor mix. We need more labor-focused policies and encourage employment-based economic activities. This is exactly why we have ideas such as the right to apprenticeship for youth, employment-linked incentive schemes for corporates, and emphasis and focus on unskilled labor-intensive economic activities such as mining for critical minerals in the Congress Party's manifesto. All of these need investment and they will promote economic growth, but it will also correct the capital-labor imbalance and ensure such economic activity generates more jobs and incomes for people, which will then reduce the gap between rich and poor. The other main reason for India's inequality being very high is the imbalance in taxation. For every 100 rupees that the government of India collects in taxes today, 67 rupees comes from the poor and the middle class through indirect taxes like GST and personal income tax rate. Only 33 rupees come from rich corporates. In most other countries in the world, including China, it is the exact opposite. 65% of taxes come from direct taxes and corporates, while only 35% come from indirect taxes in other countries. So there is a double effect in India on the poor and common person. Economic growth does not create jobs and incomes for the common person, and on top of it, they're also taxed more than the richer corporates. This is why inequality has widened alarmingly in India. So to reduce India's inequality, we need to ensure economic growth creates jobs, and then we change the tax structure to reduce taxes on the common person. Just taxing the rich people and the wealthy people through wealth tax or inheritance tax as a revenge will not generate enough money to reduce inequality, but it will impact investments and reduce economic growth, which is the most important requirement to reduce economic disparity between the rich and the poor. India can make the poor richer without making the rich poorer.